So it's noon. It is October 15th. You know what that means? If you're one of those who misbehaved and you did a tax extension, those puppies got to be done today. So we'll throw that fun reminder out for this Tuesday. And you know, things come in, you walk in the door and things change. And so we welcome to real estate, and today things change. So originally we were going to talk trust and certificate of trust from the perspective of the title company. What does that look like? Well, we're going to put that behind. If you saw my email this morning, you know that will now be 2 weeks away. Next week we have probate, and what that means to us as real estate agents, that is going to be qualifying you for 1 hour of Con Ed. Obviously, that means that unlike today, you're going to have your face on there, so it won't be able to be a sit and listen from the side, but be actively participating in front of your computer. So the shift today, I've had a few people coming to me with the question from doing continuing education and other educational opportunities that I would say give an appearance to a conflict from what we've been teaching you all year long, and what our documents even may say, to what you've learned in these additional educational opportunities. So I want to address those. So this is going to be a, let me do this, Martha, thank you. Let's see if I can make this a little bit clearer. I want to go here and go. See if, holy cow, that's just unclear anyway. Let me see if I can, I don't know what I can do to.
There you go.
Wow, I don't know what I did, but it took care of it, didn't it? You guys all thought your eyesight was off for a second there.
Camera was focusing on.
Yeah, it was something on something different other than my face. Well, anyway, here's what we want to do. Open forum today. So we could be on here for 15 minutes. We could be here for the 30 minutes. But today it's about conflicting information, anything that you may not have a clear understanding of. So here's one of them that has come out, and it was regarding how we're getting our compensation paid. Okay. And are we doing this right by having it on the purchase agreement? And is there a conflict with what the Code of Ethics says? So anybody heard anything about that? I only got a few faces on here. So here's what the basic thought was. And we've addressed this before. But the Code of Ethics basically has said that we could never try to negotiate our compensation that was offered by the listing broker as part of the MLS. We couldn't do that as part of the purchase agreement. Well, we aren't. It's the buyer. So there is no confusion with the Code of Ethics here, because what we're all doing is we're sitting down with the buyer. We consult with the buyer. We make sure that they understand that they are going to pay us, and that any money that we get from either the listing broker or the seller would get credited toward that amount. So the buyer understands that. And we educate them that one of the ways that we could do it is through the purchase agreement, by asking the seller to pay a portion or all of the compensation. Now, by the way, what is our compensation? In you know, we can, when we sign the buyer up, somebody tell me what our compensation is. 3%. I hear 3%. Who thinks it's that or more?
It's whatever is negotiated with the buyer.
That's a fair statement, Martha. It's whatever is negotiated. I'm actually trying to take you to a specific part. Basically, it says it's $395 plus blank percent. So if we use the 3%, the total compensation is $395 plus 3%. Could the buyer actually ask the seller to pay all of that? And the answer is yes. So we don't have to necessarily only collect the 3%, meaning the buyer doesn't have to ask for just the 3%. They could also ask for the $395 to be paid versus pulling it out of their own pocket. Now, I want to throw that out because it could be done. The buyer is negotiating the full offer of compensation, should they choose to, through the purchase agreement. But here's where I want to give you clarification. We aren't negotiating the offer of compensation as part of the purchase agreement. The buyer is deciding how they're going to pay us. The buyer has signed a buyer representation contract that says they owe us $395 plus blank percent. Okay, so as Martha put it, whatever we negotiate. But that is the way the buyer representation contract is set up. We consult with them. We say, here's how you can get that compensation. Anything that we get from those two parties, credited toward that amount. It's not us negotiating it. Could we negotiate that outside of the contract with a listing broker prior to? Yep, thank you, Martha, for participating. Yes, we can absolutely do that. That's what, should we choose to, the broker compensation agreement is about. We're actually negotiating, should this buyer buy this house, here's how much this broker would offer as compensation. So we are able to do what we've been doing, and it's not a conflict of interest with the Code of Ethics. Okay, now that's been one of the things that I've heard. Does anybody have any questions around that particular situation?
So a question there. If we as a buyer's agent have talked to the seller's agent or listing agent.
So buyer's agent talked to a seller's agent.
Listing agent, that what are you offering? And they say, hey, we are offering for you 3%.
Listing agent has offered 3%.
Do we still put that in the purchase agreement that the seller will pay 3% to the buyer?
So with the discussion with the listing broker, listing agent, are you offering compensation? Our scenario is yes, we are. We're offering up to 3%. Would we still put that in the purchase agreement? That depends. See, the only thing we know is that the seller and the listing broker have talked, and the seller is authorized. Ours actually says, directs us to offer whatever that percentage is, directs us to offer that. Now, from the buyer's perspective, how are we going to collect that? If it's cash, we've talked about this. If it's cash, what we've been saying is, you probably want to pay that buyer. It will save you money long term. It'll give you a better negotiable position. It's a more strategic way of offering, okay? But if they don't want to pay it out of pocket, what are their two sources? One, the listing broker. Two, the seller. Could they do the two together? Getting a portion of the 3% from both? Absolutely. Could they get it all from one or the other? Absolutely. So the answer to the question is that if that 3% is the compensation offered and the buyer wants to have that done that way, then it's only, do you want me to get all 3% and put it in your purchase agreement, or do you want me to get an agreement signed by the listing broker? Now, if one of them is going to pay the full 3%, then I only need compensation agreement if it's the listing broker who's going to pay it. Or it's on the purchase agreement if the buyer or if the seller is going to pay it. So it's always break it down, who's paying the compensation and what is the amount. Then have the correct paperwork to support that compensation. Actually, I'm not seeing any funny faces that are going on out there. It's
Because we got through that.
right. Yeah, we're getting through all this. It's really just keep it that simple, right? So any questions toward that one? Any further from there? I'm waiting.
Darwin,
Yes.
this was brought up in Con Ed last week. So you have a listing. The compensation to the listing agent is 3%. And the offered compensation from the seller to the buyer's agent is 3%. Offers come in. The accepted offer is buyer's compensation is 2.5%. Where does that other 0.5% go? That
Where
was the
does that,
question brought up in Con Ed. I'm curious what your answer is.
where does the other 0.5%? So I've got a buyer contract that says 3.
Nope, buyer contract says 2.5. So I have the listing.
Does that show up? Can you see that?
Yeah,
Yep. Okay.
I have the
So we have a
listing.
buyer representation contract for 2.5. We have 3% offered by the listing broker,
Yep.
which gives us a plus of 0.5%.
Give it to the listing.
So, the answer actually is pretty obvious. We cannot take any more than what we've signed up for. So even though the listing broker was offering 3%, we're only taking 2.5 because that's all we get. So Karina's bringing up that wonderful question. What do you think happens to that 3 or that 0.5%? What is the answer, Karina? You can't play.
Give it to the listing agent or? No.
Because I'm on the other side of it. I have the seller.
She has the seller.
Yep.
Oh, nobody's wanting to play.
Then change it.
So here's what Karina has, if I'm right. She has a listing contract that says I get 6.0%. She was authorized and directed to offer 3%.
Just
Now,
change it.
I'm keeping it simple, but the last I knew,
5.5.
that leaves 3.5%.
Listing.
Now, contractually, I believe that's what our contract says. We get 6, you're authorized to offer 3. They only paid 2.5. However, this is my conscience that plays on me. What am I gonna take?
Change the 6 to 5.5. No, 2.5 to 3.
Yeah, so see what I'm gonna do? It should be the seller who benefits in this situation, which in reality, who else is benefiting? The buyer. Right? They're negotiating with the seller only paying 2.5. If you came to me and said, Darwin, what should I do? I'm just gonna take the 3 that I would have gotten anyway.
That's what Con Ed directed us to do.
Yep. Again, the contract doesn't say that.
And do you have to change the 6 to 5.5? Or just?
No, I'm just gonna do my 3, they're gonna do their 2.5.
And that's it.
Yeah, because remember, the listing contract is between us as a listing broker and they as a seller. This 2.5 was negotiated, and again, that it's part of where things are fuzzy, because here's what I knew from the very beginning. This was gonna happen. And so not being attorneys in how this paragraph of compensation should actually be written to cover this type of situation, we just know who we are as a company and how we should treat people and treat them fairly. Okay, so now, what are other companies going to do? We don't know. We don't know. But, you know, again, get your full compensation. And don't allow a listing broker or seller to negotiate your compensation. That's a necessary expense that the buyer is asking to be built into the transaction. Okay, so don't allow them to negotiate. If they've got a, and some of you are going to get this because we don't want to take it forever, but is I would put it to an agent. If you have to find, or if your seller can't find a way to accept the offer as written, and they have to reject it, and everybody needs to understand, if they don't accept it as written, even though they're going to make a counter offer, they have rejected the offer. And that is selling, people. Get it into everyone's heads that if they cannot find their way to accept the offer as written and that they must reject the offer, please don't counter changing the compensation. Now, hopefully I have that conversation after they've rejected it.
Darwin,
Yes, sir.
I agree what you're saying about giving the 3% regardless. But you also say that if you have a buyer's agency contract for 2.5, that's the maximum the agent can receive.
Correct.
So where does that other 5.5% go?
Well, that's the part that we address right here, Larry, is that if it's us, I think we reduce the total compensation by that 0.5%. So that we still take our 3 and the buyer's broker gets 2.5 that they've negotiated with their buyer, that the buyer then negotiated with the seller through the listing contract.
I understand that, but usually when an agent calls, they said, are you offering a compensation? And if so, how much? And in this case, you would say, I'm offering 3%.
Yep. I'm offering 3%. Now,
You say
that
you're
covers them if
offering
they only sign
3%.
for 2.5.
You're offering 3% for a full price offer.
Yep. Yeah, that's great. Yeah. You know, matter of fact, Valerie, you and I had talked about this one previously. You know, anytime we have to remember this, anytime that we call and ask, how much is the seller offering or you offering? Again, I always like to say it's the seller offering it. It's being offered at the asking price. That is fully negotiable at any point in time, even on a full price offer. But basically they're saying, yes, we'll offer X, but it's a full price offer.
But you don't know what the buyer's agent has negotiated with the buyer.
Correct.
So you come to the closing table, you're giving them 3%.
No.
No.
Why not?
I'm looking at this. Either the buyer is paying it themselves, which as a listing broker, I want to know. If it's not addressed on a purchase agreement or in a compensation agreement, that tells me the buyer is paying it. But before I just assume that that's a situation, I'm going to talk with the buyer's agent and get verification that that's what they wanted. Now that's, again, highly potential if it's a cash offer. Ours will specify that that's the situation. But again, if it's absent, then there needs to be either addressed on the purchase agreement or through a compensation agreement. And by the way, at that point, we know what we're paying.
So they'll submit that prior to, but again, even, you know, before I even submit the offer, I always ask how much
Yep.
is it?
Yes.
You know? So anyway.
But
All right.
Darwin,
Go ahead.
so let's flip this around. We're talking about buyer agents getting paid. I don't disclose what my seller's willing to pay. When I get a call from an agent that says, is your seller willing to pay buyer agency? And I say, please submit your offer with what your buyer agency agreement states, and that will be a part of our negotiations. And everybody that I've ever talked to has been fine with that. And we ended up with 6 offers on this contract.
Yeah.
And
You
that's
know,
how
it's
we
a,
ended
it's a
up at
great
that number.
question. I don't think we've talked about it a lot, but you just threw something out. And I think I would do this. I'm gonna reverse it. And literally, Karina, when you just threw this out, it was like, wait a minute. And by the way, our listing contract says that the seller directs. And this was a conversation I had on Friday with the chairman of the grievance committee, because she was looking for some guidance from North Logan County Board of Realtors. So we were really just talking about this, but instead of me answering what the seller has directed us to offer, and that's key verbiage, by the way, is what I'm getting at, can we withhold what that amount is when the seller has directed us to offer? I'm not going to give a concrete answer to that, but they're saying, look, I'm telling you, go tell everybody that you're offering 3%. But could we do this? So if Karina calls and asks me, Darwin, are you offering compensation? I can say, sure. And then leave it. And she's going to say, well, how much? Well, let me ask you, how much is your buyer committed to pay you? 3%? Great. At a full price offer, my seller is willing to do that. Could be 2.5%. Great. My seller is willing to compensate you the 2.5% at a full price offer. You see, I don't know that we need to tell them how much we're compensating. They already know how much they need. So why not ask? Well, let me ask you this. You've already got a signed contract. How much are you needing for the buyer? Well, I've signed 2.5. Well, what my seller is offering will cover that on a full price offer.
I did ask the listing agent how much you offer co-op. And he said, our company pay 3%.
Yeah, no,
Okay,
and there was a
so
clarification.
That
So
means
just
you
to
have
catch
to
everybody
take it
up.
from him, the
Um,
company.
okay, so Andy here is brought this up. I've called and talked to the listing broker / agent. What are you offering? And apparently they said very specifically, our company is offering 3%. So I think the question then is do we need to collect it from that broker? What say you?
Yes,
I have a yes and a yes. Everybody on here, guys, look at this. They're all biting their lip going.
this is 2 times happened to me for 2 offers.
Yeah,
I don't ask the
I
seller.
will tell you
They
that
never say the seller. They
Yeah.
say we.
they never say the seller, they're
We
saying,
own.
wait.
That means they have a listing agreement, 3% to the selling agent,
Yeah.
3% to.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, so I think it's a great question to kind of clarify, because in reality, if I'm right, don't we all have pretty much the same agreement? And what we have is the seller has an agreement with the listing broker, and we'll use our numbers for these purposes that says we get 6%. And you're authorizing / directing us to offer 3%. In our case, what we always want the direction of is a buyer's broker or 3% to a transaction coordinator. And if you haven't ever heard me on that one before and you're thinking do 1%, no, it's 3%. You want to know why? Give me a call, but offer them the 3%. So the seller has an agreement with the listing broker. I will pay you 6%. And I'm directing you to offer 3% to these two individuals. So who has to pay the 3% to that cooperating broker?
The
That's
listing
the
broker,
question. Now, I hear broker.
listing
Jeff,
broker.
what say you? Yeah, Jeff, are you just going, yes, please?
No, if you have an exclusive right to sell and the exclusive right to sell says exactly what you have on your screen, then the listing broker will pay 3% to the buyer broker. Because that's what your contract says.
But let me ask you this.
Okay, I'm ready.
The buyer says, put it on the purchase agreement, having the seller pay it.
Then what I do is I go in and I change the, oh, sorry.
Hold on, Jeff.
Yeah.
Can the buyer do that?
Yes,
Absolutely.
yes.
Absolutely, they can do that. Go ahead, Jeff.
So then what I would do is I would change my exclusive right to sell to say that the seller is paying me 3% and not paying anything, not allowing us to pay anything to the co-oping broker. So my seller is paying me, my broker, 3%, and my seller is paying the co-oping broker 3%.
For a total of
6%.
Okay. So it's not a requirement. But are some brokers going to be in such a way that no, it can't happen that way? Yes, I absolutely believe that could happen. But then they're going to say that buyer, seller, you two can't agree to do that. You realize that's what the listing broker would be saying is no, you as a buyer and seller can't agree to have it handled that way. Yes, I believe that could happen very, very firmly. For those on the blue side, you'll see that I've actually recently added a clause that should you choose, you could put on the listing contract. And basically it says something to this level. In the event that the seller agrees to pay a compensation to the buyer's broker, our compensation will be reduced by that amount. Now, I've thought of this. But Darwin, what if it's only 2.5? Well, that it would leave us with 3.5. But what are we going to do? We're going to take the 3. So just know that that's out there. And for the gold folks, we're hoping very shortly that we'll have one library for Century 21 professionals. Hopefully everybody on the blue side has heard that, but we will be Century 21 professionals. We'll have that one library, and I'll add that to the clause library. If you're going, what the heck is a clause library? Talk to your manager and they'll be able to guide you on that. I got a question here.
Actually, the seller offers 6%, 3%, and 3%. However, you call the listing broker, just like we come to your question, offer 2.5%. And this time, because seller asked to give it 3, but in the purchase agreement is 2.5. That means the 0.5% have to go back to the seller because you could not keep it 3.5.
Correct.
The seller seen the purchase agreement and say 2.5, and he said, here you go. I offer 6, 3 for you, 3 for him.
Well,
But now it's 2.5. You have to return 0.5% back to me.
well, that's what we would do.
Yes,
Right.
this is the legal way to do it. Actually.
Well, not really.
Actually, it is because you
here's-
breached the contract between you.
Let me
and the
clarify, because I'll show you with the numbers that you're putting in. The listing contract says, I'll pay you $395 and blank percent. That's what it says. That's paragraph 5, I believe. Paragraph 6 then says, I direct you to offer to, in our case, we do buyer broker and transaction coordinator, and let's say it's 3% again. Where's that say that I only get 3% for the listing side?
Well, if you divide that, think
Ah,
there is
yes.
something here, buyer agent and listing agent, listing.
It doesn't say that. It doesn't say that. It says I get 6%. So guys, so
Yeah,
Andy,
in-
you and I
in-
know,
in the
hold on,
contract say
hold
that.
on, let me, because I want to, not everybody can hear everything that you and I are discussing, right? So here's what I want to throw out. Here's what we know. When we do 395 and 6 and offer 3 and 3, how much are we really saying that we're going to take? 3. What I'm throwing out is the contract doesn't say that. The contract says we get 6. Because let me throw this to you, based upon the way some of you are thinking and the way that Andy's talking. Here's one for you, because this will just throw you into tizzy. So don't lose what we've already said. That's the way to do it. But let me give you the scenario that you're a listing agent, you hold your house open, Joe Schmuck walks in the door, says, oh my gosh, I love it, I want to buy it. Can you write it up? Are you going to do it? Yes. How do you get compensated? You're not the buyer's broker. You're not the transaction coordinator. You're the seller's agent. Well, if you're the seller's agent, those two options are gone. How much do you get paid?
6%.
6%. But if we're thinking the way that we were just talking, we'd only get 3. Right? So I just, again, now you're getting an idea of why I'm going, we're not 100% on how our contract should be written. This is where our what's the word? Not ethics. My conscience, who I am, my integrity, that's the word I was looking for. That's what we got to work with. Because Andy, what do we know? We're really talking, we know we're getting 3%. So you're right on with what you were saying, but I want contractually,
Yeah, the only
we
time
do get 6.
The only time we get 6 if we have a double dip.
Yes. Yes, it's the way we're going to do it. We're going to put it that way. Okay. What else do we have out there? Otherwise, I'm going to jump to another one that I heard kind of confuse some folks.
Yeah, Darwin.
Before you
yes.
confuse,
Go ahead, Holly.
At last week's Con Ed, they said that we can show a house being a transaction coordinator, that we don't need to have a buyer's contract just to show the house.
Yep. So this, and I'll let you know that your whole leadership team was together last week, and this one popped up for a brief discussion, because the question is are we missing a potential form? So now, understanding that we all know what a transaction coordinator is, and we know none of the above. We know a buyer's agent. The situation comes up, and Holly, maybe you can clarify further why we would be a transaction coordinator. Most likely is because we'd have a buyer who's saying, I don't want to sign a contract to have you represent me. Would that be a fair assumption on that?
Yeah, or else it's a floor call and they want to look at the house and you hadn't had
Right.
a chance to interview with them yet.
Okay.
And you want to try and get the sale. So you're thinking, sure, I'll go ahead and show you the house. I just need you to sign this form here, this transaction coordinator on the disclosure. No. Yeah, the agency
Yes,
disclosure
yep.
statement.
So I think everybody kind of got what Holly's got. This is a real potential situation. And you remember Zillow came out with what they called a showing agreement,
What's that?
okay? A showing agreement.
What do you mean?
So, go ahead.
Oh, God,
Deanna.
no.
We'll-
No,
When we
I'm
clarify.
worried he can't handle these two. No, I got her just for the week. So the 16th
Oh,
to, yeah, I gotta go out to Kara's.
so Holly brought up a really good one here. But here's where I want you to come at this now. I'll show you the house, but don't worry about it. You don't have to pay me.
Okay.
That's essentially what we're doing, right? Because if I show them a house and it's not an exclusive right and there's no compensation, or I show them the house, it's not an exclusive right, but there's no compensation. What could that buyer go do? Group participation time.
Go to another agent.
So, do we want to sign that kind of an agreement? Or, and this is the key, and Holly, I'm glad that you brought this up, and I'm glad that it came up last week, because it brings up the subject. So, I'm gonna say that, look, if I show you the property and you buy it, will you buy it from me? Go ahead and role play with me, Holly.
Okay, yeah. Okay.
So you
Sure, I'll
would
buy
buy
it
it
from
from
you.
me?
Yeah.
Okay. And would you be willing to sign a contract ensuring that I get paid my my fee for doing this work? It's 3%.
I'm not comfortable signing a contract at this time.
You're not. So you're not willing to pay me?
I'm willing to pay you, but I don't know you personally, and I
Yeah,
don't want to
yeah.
be able to
I
see if we
understand.
get along.
Well, Holly, then let me ask you this. You said that you would buy it from me and you would pay me. So the only way that I would have you sign a contract is if you bought this particular home. Would that be okay with you?
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, I guess. Yeah.
Okay. So listen, let's get there about, instead of 4:30, why don't we meet at 4:25? I'll just cover it very quickly so that you can see that it's only if you buy this home. And then if we really do like each other and we think that we can work with each other and this home is not the one, well, then we could talk further about what we could do. Fair enough?
Yeah, I guess.
So here's,
Okay.
yeah, so here's where I want to go with it. If they won't sign a contract that will pay you, do you really want to show them a house? So I think it's one of the things that we have to take a look at, and that's a question for all 30 plus of us to be able to answer, you know, and however many more may be in a room. I've got, what, 6 of us here, guys. We need to take a look at what are we willing to do as an agent, because here would be the other, and I think it was referred to as a transaction coordinator agreement. Now, a transaction coordinator is an agent, a licensee. Everybody needs to be reminded of that. A transaction coordinator is a licensee who does not represent either the buyer or the seller and therefore owes no fiduciary responsibilities to either party. Yet conducts and performs all of the services of a regular real estate agent. Which is why, if you're wondering why I say offer transaction coordinator 3%, that's the reason. But now I want you to think of this. If this individual is going to see that we get paid, and we've got to have an agreement with the buyer to get paid. Here's what they just said. Let me put it in common words. It would be, Mays, I'll pay you, but don't represent me.
You have it in writing?
But well, I have to.
You have to put it in.
I have to get it in writing, right?
Yes.
So they're saying, don't represent me, but show me all the houses, but don't represent me. But yep, I'll pay you your full compensation.
That means you have to sign an agreement with
You
them.
gotta sign an agreement, but why would a buyer do that? Why would a buyer sign an agreement that says, I will pay you your full compensation, but don't represent me?
Don't represent.
This is the key that, do you understand? I mean, it's like, I mean, was that a buyer who's smoking doobies, or did we not explain it to him correctly? Don't represent me, but I will pay you. Is that logical? I mean, maybe I'm missing something, but nobody's told me so far whenever we've talked about this one. I just can't see that being logical. I'll commit to pay you, but, oh, geez, don't represent me. Now, I'll tell you, the only time that I could ever see that, what are we really talking about? Because anytime we're talking about this stuff as a buyer, something like this has existed as a listing agent. What would that be called as a listing side? When a lister will pay you, but they're not going to give you an exclusive right to sell. What is it called? Anybody remember? Is it not an open agreement? If you bring me a buyer, I'll pay you.
Yes.
It's an open agreement,
They
right?
Always say that.
That's what you're asking a buyer to do when it's,
Especially for sale by owner.
they're saying, I will pay you.
Yeah.
But only if you sell me a house. But I don't want exclusivity. I don't want to be bound only to you. If that's the case, again, I don't know that I would want to work with that buyer. Okay? So I got a question here in the
I have a
office.
Question, I believe all the agent, we went through this scenario. While you are showing house to your client, and suddenly a couple people walking in the door and say, oh, are you the agent? Can we see the house? What are you gonna do in this?
Oh, wow. You're right. We all have run into this
All have.
because it kind of puts you into a different scenario. And actually it's not a change, but here's one that Andy, and we were kind of having an open topic here today. Andy just hit it this way. He says, we've all done this if we've been showing homes, right? Where we're out, we're showing a home and stranger comes along and says, oh, I've been wondering about this house. Could you show it to me? The question is what do you do? You've got this buyer whom you represent.
I give them a business card.
Can you show them the house?
If they're-
Can you show these strangers a house, that same house now?
It might not be smart, but if it's your listing, you can.
Right? Because you represent the seller. That's acting in the best interest of the seller.
Yeah. but don't
Great,
you
great
think so?
answer. What happens when I'm representing the buyer and not the seller? Should I show that house to him? And there is a good, clear answer to this. What do you need from your buyer first?
Permission?
Permission, basically that we're not interested. Now, do you have time to run people through real quick? Absolutely, but prior to that, nope, you're gonna
Yeah,
give them a
but-
business card.
But most of the time, we give them the business card and also we
Yeah.
ask for their phone numbers. and
Yes.
their name.
We're gonna
Then
treat 'em like a
later you
buyer.
will Give them. a
Let me
call.
rephrase, we're gonna treat them like a prospect.
Yes.
We're gonna get their name, we're gonna give them a card, we're gonna get their phone number, give them another card. So, yeah, that's actually a great one. Let me check, chat.
Darwin,
Yes,
we also, and I've asked my agents to keep on hand in their car the exclusive buyer contract. And once you've cleared with your buyer client that you're actually showing the property, that they're okay with it because they don't have an interest, couldn't you have that prospective buyer or that buyer sign the contract on the spot and then show it?
yes. With Andy's scenario that he brought up, the only thing is we're there on behalf of the buyer whom we've already got signed. Is it in the best interest of that buyer to have you show another buyer? So I want to get, nope, we're not interested, and then absolutely do exactly what you were just
Exactly.
talking, Brenda.
Exactly, yeah.
Yep.
Abiding by what you said, you know, clarifying it with that buyer. That number one, it's okay, they're not interested, and they have the time for you to do that.
Yep, you are absolutely right. There is a question that Prasanna had out here. And Prasanna, that's really a good question because in the past, we have been able to do something similar to what you put here. So, guys, for you, or if you're not seeing the chat, why can't we say up to blank percent to the buyer's agent or transaction coordinator on the listing contract? We have to have specific amounts on both the listing contract and the buyer representation contract. So it can't be something that can be calculated. It's got to be specific. So that's the reason that you've got to have a number, something that is solid and is, I guess the word is calculated. It can't be open-ended. That's what it would be. Cannot be open-ended. Must be a predetermined specific amount. Okay. Lori, I don't think we've got yours yet. You put it in here. Go ahead.
What if you're at the property waiting for your buyer to get there and another person that's not represented by anybody shows up and wants to see it? Can you tell them, sure, can you go wait down at the corner? Let me show my people and then I'll get back to you after they leave?
Frankly, it would be the appropriate way, because if your buyer says we love it, write it up, you really shouldn't show it to these strangers.
Okay.
Make sense? Because again, it's fiduciary duties and responsibilities
Yes.
are owed to that current client. We would be acting against them, because think of this. What if that buyer says, oh, I love it?
Mhm.
What if the
Then all
buyer
of a
says, I
sudden we
gotta
didn't
think
act in the
about it,
best interest of our current buyer. Go ahead, Lydia.
Darwin? What if the buyer says, we want to think about it?
Or I don't like it.
Well, see, I want to think about it, or I don't like it. There's a big difference, right? I need to think about it. I'm going to take it very clear, but let's say I do all of my objection handling and I can't pull it out of them and they can't say, nope, we don't want it, or yeah, we want it. And they leave us right there in limbo with, well, nope, I don't do anything. I got to look for a sign from God or something of that nature. Well, at that point, they're still interested.
If he says,
Would
"I
it
don't
be
like
in the best interest of your buyer to show it to somebody else whom you do not have a contract with? And the answer would be no. So with all of these, it's important, and this is why fiduciary responsibilities, to know them, are so important. Because it's what we owe our current principal, they're called, our client. It's when we know those that we can go, okay, here's the situation. Is this in the best interest? That's how we can make those decisions. I got a question here.
Okay, you are showing the house to your buyer. He said, I don't like it. And there's someone outside. He said, I'm interested. I like it, but you don't have a contract with them.
Got
So,
sign,
yeah.
so this is what Brenda was talking about. So I'm showing the house, I'm done with it. I'm waving goodbye to the buyers, and buyers say, yeah, I don't like it. We'll keep looking. And somebody else pulls up. Could I show them that house? The answer would be, in this case, yes, after getting an agreement signed.
But some buyers, they don't like to have an agreement.
Well, actually,
These kids.
Then the buyer cannot
and
see
then
the house
then
with
you're
you.
not gonna show it to him. He's gonna call another agent. He's gonna show it, and then
So are there going to be
He said,
people that
"Okay,
will
let's do
violate
it."
the terms of the agreement?
he said, let's do it.
Are there going to be agents who will violate the terms of our settlement?
Hmm.
Yes. I don't want to be the one who gets called in for a fine or whatever happens because we're not following the terms of the settlement.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's going to happen. We know that will happen,
No, I
right?
know, I'm working with
Yeah.
them, it's
Listen,
fine.
all this story, it was right before we were doing it right. Why they make it complicated and look around?
It is complicated.
Circle for what?
So Faik is just going, we had everything settled. Why? Money, money, and the DOJ doesn't like us.
Come on, I don't need that.
There's the simple answer to it.
Our, what they call represented, they pay money for
Yeah.
nothing. Maybe this money, 400 million, they paid, half of them had been stolen.
Well, the attorneys are the ones that, by the way, it's the reason that I always throw out, it was not just the attorneys. because we know that the population, those who were part of the class action, they didn't really benefit from it. Who did? Sellers, or excuse me, the attorneys who got 33% of it, and the DOJ who doesn't like the way that we have been doing business. So, let me check, see if I've got other questions
I have a
here, or you guys
question.
can just come off. Go ahead.
I have a question. So you just confused me.
Never, Joyce, I don't do that.
I know it, but you did.
Go
Um,
ahead.
so I have two clients that I have
Oh.
agreements with. And I've showed this house to one. They don't know yet if they want it or not. Now I've got this other one that says, oh, we want to go look at this house. Are you telling me I can't do that? I can only show that house to one person at a time?
Joyce, that's a great question, but a different scenario. Because your contract is signed with two buyers. So you've already got the contracts, you already represent both buyers. So if you go into the buyer representation of contract, you will see that it actually addresses this scenario and authorizes you, gives you permission to show the home to both buyers. But the key, you actually represent both buyers who have an interest in that same home. Does that make sense?
I'm confused.
You're confused?
No,
So
I'm
big key.
unconfused.
Yeah, the big-
Unconfused.
Go ahead. What was it?
No longer confused.
Unconfused. Okay, cool. You were trying to confuse me. All right, the last one I got here. Has anyone have the homeowner's insurance company ask for the inspection report? So that's a question Valerie's typed in. Has anybody had the insurance company asking for an inspection report? I see one head nodding. So guys, just type it into the chat session. We'll see. I see Karina, you have run into it. Anyone else? I can say I have heard of it. Which is on one hand disturbing, but on the other hand, I think the reason they would do it is they might be able to save that potential homeowner a little bit of money. So if you got a great house, I'd share it.
No,
Brenda?
this is why it came up. I'm in a forum and I've heard this discussion. So the homeowner's insurance company is saying, the inspection report came up something like, say, squirrels in the attic, which is a definite homeowner's insurance concern.
Yeah.
And instead of concessions being offered, the homeowner's insurance can say, no, that has to be taken care of prior to closing, and get involved in that manner, for instance.
Yep, I could definitely see that happening. It could work both ways.
For mine,
Add anything to that?
For mine, it worked that the insurance company for the buyer, I had the listing. The insurance company for the buyer said that there was a claim for roof damage and the seller had put on a new roof. So we needed the inspection report to verify the age of the roof. It was easier than having them come out. We were 2 days prior to closing. It's easier than having somebody come out and verify the age of the roof.
So I think once you get a request for something like that, it would be why, and run with it, because they may not want to use that insurance company in a case of like what Valerie was bringing up with squirrels. So, well, good. I think we've addressed everything that's been in the chat. Is there anybody else that's out there? Oh my gosh, we ended up in an hour. I was thinking it might be 15 minutes today. So it was kind of, again, when they came to me and said, Darwin, is there any way that we could postpone the certificate of trust? I said, I know I've got things that can be talked about. And I just started with 2 thoughts and we didn't even hit one of them. So let me hit this final one real quick. Procuring cause. If we understand procuring cause in that term, it dealt with the amount of compensation offered by a listing broker. as part of the MLS. That amount that was advertised in the MLS, the compensation paid by a listing broker. Do we have that any longer? The answer is no. So is procuring cause a real thing any longer? So guys, I'm going to tell you that I just had a conversation with important people at North Oakland County Board of Realtors on Friday, and they agree with me. Procuring cause is no longer. However, could there still become issues with the collection of compensation? The answer is yes. How is that going to be handled? By an arbitration panel. You're going to file for arbitration. But here's what we're going to look at. What's the probability that we should actually collect? Do we have the proper paperwork? What were the circumstances? And believe me, we're going to run into things that we haven't thought of. And one of those would be this. What happens when we get a call, we go out and show it, we do agency disclosure, and right before they sign it, we say, by the way, have you got any other contract signed or agency relationship with any other agent in the state of Michigan? And they say, no. So we go ahead and write up a contract, purchase agreement, seller accepts it, we close, and then somebody comes up and says, well, wait a minute, I had a contract with that buyer. Ruh-roh. Because now what are you going to do? That was when we were on the good side. But what happens when you're on the side where you had a contract signed and the other agent did everything right? Anybody got an answer for that one? Well, we got thoughts for what we would do with that one. Bottom line, I'm going to tell you, I don't know that there's a right answer for that. But those are the type of scenarios. Jeff, go ahead. We'll let you take us on the way home.
Can we try and go after the buyer and ask them to pay us?
So, you know, on the short answer, the answer is absolutely. Because it had nothing to do with the other agent. We would be dealing with an ethics situation on that one. Because the code of ethics will not allow us to have a client enter into two contracts, committing them to two commissions. But see, we did everything right, and we'd have the agency disclosure that they signed showing that we asked. Now, always make sure you ask and ask, this is the reason why. But the short answer would be, who's responsible and who signed a contract that said that they would pay us? The buyer. And will we go after them? I can only tell you this. We have gone after sellers. We have gone after buyers. But we weigh the financial reward versus the risk. The probability versus the potential. Whether or not we'll go after it. But we have.
On the commission, I mean, how much?
How much is that?
I'm still talking about earnest money deposit.
Yeah,
That's
earnest money deposits. That's one of them where, thank God, we never had to go do anything. But it's like, earnest money deposits, work it out, people. Work it out, because there's no guarantee that you're going to get it. There's no guarantee you're going to keep it all when something went wrong. So get it worked out. Jeff, anything you would add to that?
No, I think that was good.
All right, guys. Well, listen, it is 12:59. So next week, I'll get verification, but we have, I believe it's Wanda from Rick Linnell's Linnell and Association, who is going to come in again, understanding probate for the real estate professional. It will be good for 1 hour of Con Ed. Make sure that you got your computers with you so that your individual face can be on camera. That's the way that you'll get that 1 hour of Con Ed credit for the electives that we need for our cycle. With that, wraps up another Hot Topic Tuesday, guys. See you next week.
Next Tuesday, that one, the 1 hour?